Yes, sir. Yeah,
and the fight with the White House over the document request. Some of your members who are frustrated have said that Congress should use the inherent contempt powers, specifically to fine individuals who are in defiance of subpoenas. Do you support imposing fines on people who are defiant who have no subpoena?
Well, that is a path. That it would be inherent contempt. There's three contempt: civil contempt, criminal contempt, and inherent contempt. And if they fail to a path, I'm not saying an intent, but I'm just saying, again, as I mentioned to Katie, that this is one of the possibilities that is out there. I'm not saying we're going down that path, but I'm just saying it is not to be excluded. Nothing is off the table. So an inherent contempt, you send the subpoena, they don't honor it, then you hold them in contempt, and if they do not comply, then you can fine them, and then you can hold them accountable for the money that you fine them. So for people who work in the federal government or in the administration who now are having to hire lawyers, who's paying for that? The Republican National Committee, the president says. Well, that's interesting. Is that even legal? I don't know. It doesn't seem to bother them whether it is or not. But you can fine them and then hold them accountable if they don't pay the fines.
Do you favor that approach?
No, I'm just saying it is an approach. It is an approach that is there.
What's your position on that approach?
I don't have to have a position. I'm waiting for my first. We want, as I said to Katie, we want to see what we can get respectfully. First we ask, then we subpoena friendly, then we subpoena otherwise, and then we see what we get. So let's not leapfrog over what we think should be the path that should be taken. But I only say to you, whether it's using impeachment among other purposes for investigations, or whether it's using fines as an incentive for people to earlier on supply the information, it's a possibility. It's not something that, as I said, I'm a big believer in the committee system. I have great confidence in our committee chairs and how they go forward.
Are we really in the middle of a constitutional crisis, or is this just the same old day-to-day partisan warfare between President Trump and the House Democrats? Certainly, Nancy Pelosi and her leadership gang have been ratcheting up the rhetoric in the last couple of days as we have had the subpoena battle, or I should say battles, between the two sides, resulting in the vote in the House Judiciary Committee, utterly predictable party line vote to hold Attorney General Bill Barr in contempt of Congress. By the way, the House, I'm sure, will follow suit. It ultimately won't mean much or get tied up in the courts. Eric Holder was held in contempt of Congress by a Republican House. Nothing happened to him. Nothing's going to happen to Barr. But we are hearing language from the Democrats like constitutional crisis. That's what Jerry Nadler says. President Trump is self-impeaching, according to Nancy Pelosi. Jerry Connolly, another Democrat, says we should be putting people in jail over this. Well, what is this? It's interesting because the way the press is covering this is there are a lot of echoes of Watergate. Nixon is often mentioned. New York Times piece says the Democrats are considering bundling together, kind of like your cable bill, I guess. You bundle all the services, bundling together every request that is being blocked by the White House for Mueller to testify, for Don McGahn to testify, for the unredacted portions of the Mueller report, which is about 2% of at least the obstruction of justice section. The Trump tax returns, which the Treasury is refusing to hand over. Bundle it all up, model it on the Nixon impeachment clause, and I guess that kind of gets you down the slippery slope toward impeachment. But here's the thing. President Trump seems to be goading the Democrats, almost prodding the Democrats to do the impeachment thing. I mean, he would love nothing better because he could run against this until November of 2020. It absolutely will energize his base. He can say he's a victim of partisan warfare, the deep state. After all, the Mueller report didn't recommend any criminal charges. It fires up his people. It completely obliterates any Democratic agenda for the next many months. And in the end, he gets acquitted by the Republican-controlled Senate. Pelosi and company are well aware of this, and they're well aware that Trump is trying to bait them. But the question is, can they resist that baiting? So when you hear this language, constitutional crisis and so forth, a couple of possible explanations. One is they're really angry. They feel like the president is thumbing his nose at the legitimate powers of Congress to conduct oversight of the executive branch, which happens to be an important constitutional principle. Whether the business with Barr reaches that level is another story, but there is a principle at stake here. Or it could be that Nancy Pelosi realizes with things getting so hot and with so many rank and file Democrats and certainly the liberal AOC wing of her party favoring impeachment, that they've got to sound like they're standing up to Trump. Even if they don't do impeachment hearings, they can't back down. They've got to say that this is terrible, this is horrible, he's flouting the Constitution, at least to satisfy their most liberal voters. I still personally doubt that Pelosi will go all the way and start impeachment hearings, but if anything, they are being inflamed by the president not just saying, I'm not going to comply with this subpoena or this request for documents. I'm not going to comply with any of it. And the media are all over this. They love to be in crisis mode and lets them keep talking about the Mueller report, even after the Mueller report didn't lead to anything further of a criminal nature. But is it a crisis? I think we're one step away from a crisis. It's going to wind up in court. Now, if the president were to defy a court order, that would lead us into Nixon territory. Right now, it still seems to be partisan warfare. The crisis rhetoric, I think, is the Democrats' way of pushing back against a president who is just driving them crazy.
Joining us tonight is Jason Chaffetz. He's former Republican congressman from the great state of Utah, former House Oversight Committee chairman, a best-selling author, Fox Business contributor, great American. Good to have you with us. And I know the reason you're with us is you want to watch very, very close up the rally in Pennsylvania here on Fox Business.
Yeah.
Let's start with Adam Schiff, because it just amuses me to even mention his name. Insisting on impeachment, Justin Amash, Republican so-called, pushing the same nonsense. Why do the American people have to put up with these clowns?
Well, if they're so adamant about bringing it up and there's so much evidence, why don't they actually do it? I mean, you have about 60 Democrats who've actually, before the Mueller report even came out, piled on and said, oh, yeah, we got to impeach the president. But they're not doing it because there is no case. There is no underlying way to do it. And I'm surprised, it shows how far, a face the nation has fallen when every single week it seems like they put on Adam Schiff. He's been spewing lies for 2 years, and I don't know why anybody listens to him at this point, because he has no case.
Well, Mitt Romney, our friend Mitt Romney, said that little Adam Schiff was being courageous in his calls. Said he disagreed with him, though, after that. What do you make of that kind of nonsense?
Well, look, each of these individuals in the House and Senate, they're entitled to their own opinion, but they don't have many people following them. It's just not going to go anywhere. At this point, the Mueller report is in the rearview mirror. There was no collusion. There was no obstruction of justice. They can keep flailing about it. But what I really think they're trying to do is distract from the idea that Horowitz and Durham and some of these other names within the Department of Justice are actually pursuing the underlying premise, and that is going to be the real news.
The underlying premise is that the leadership of the Obama Justice Department, the Obama FBI, and the Obama intelligence community appear to have conspired to overthrow the President of the United States.
News alert. House Democrats growing increasingly frustrated as their investigations into President Trump continue to stall. It now appears special counsel Robert Mueller is not likely to testify, maybe not until at least June, if at all, as discussions continue. And the chances of former White House counsel Don McGahn testifying before tomorrow's deadline appear to be slim as the White House pushes back against the congressional investigations. Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge live in Washington with the latest on this. Catherine?
Thanks, Harrison. Good afternoon. The Democrats say negotiations continue for Robert Mueller's testimony. And in this case, there is bipartisan agreement with the Democratic House Judiciary Chairman Jerry Nadler and the ranking Republican Doug Collins seeking Mueller's appearance. While Nadler is focused on obstruction allegations against the president and Mueller's apparent disagreement with Attorney General William Barr over the report's handling, Collins wants more clarity on when Mueller knew the Russia collusion allegations were thin. Based on our reporting here at Fox, former FBI lawyer Lisa Page and FBI Director James Comey told House investigators in private interviews that coordination between the Trump campaign and Russia was still unproven by May 2017, when special counsel Mueller was appointed. And the surveillance warrant for Trump campaign aid was not renewed in September 2017, and that is seen as another indicator the collusion allegations were washing out.
When did he actually come to the conclusion that there was no obstruction? When did he actually decide that there were issues that we didn't look into the dossier more?
Former White House counsel Don McGahn is scheduled to testify on the Hill tomorrow, but as you noted, the expectation here is that he will not appear, citing executive privilege issues. 2 weeks ago, the president told Fox in clear terms where he stood.
I just want to be clear on Don McGahn. Under what circumstances would you allow him to testify to Congress about the special counsel investigation?
Well, I've had him testifying already for 30 hours.
So is the answer no?
And it's really, so I don't think I can let him and then tell everybody else you can't, because especially him, because he was a counsel. So they've testified for many hours, all of them. Many people.
So as far as you're concerned, it's really, it's kind of done.
I can't say, well, one can and the others can't.
Okay, so is it done?
I would say it's done.
If McGahn does show tomorrow or does not show tomorrow, House Democrats face a choice to hold him in contempt, issue more subpoenas, or wait and regroup after the Congressional Memorial Day recess. So that means key testimony from McGahn and Mueller wouldn't happen until June at the earliest, Harris.
Catherine, thank you very much.
Remember that moment when the Mueller report finally came out, no criminal charges recommended against the president, and there was a widespread feeling that maybe the 2 years of intensive, nonstop, everything dialed up to 11 coverage by the press was a little overdone, a little overhyped, a little overwrought. Maybe there should be some reflection, and at least, finally, the Mueller thing is out, it's over, and the country could move on. Well, that didn't happen. The media reflection didn't happen. News organizations defended their coverage. And it just seems like the fixation now continues, because rather than talk about what's in the Mueller report, we've all had a few weeks to digest it, the spotlight shifted to Bill Barr. Was he lying? Did he perjure himself? Was he just a shill for the president? Should he be run out of town? Should he have to resign? Should he be impeached? All of that consuming a lot of media attention. There'll be a vote this week on contempt in the House because Barr didn't show up for House Judiciary hearing or provide a fully unredacted report. So there's that. There's also the drama about Bob Mueller himself writing that letter of complaint, which was leaked, about how the Attorney General had handled the whole thing. And all of the different, revisiting of allegations. I mean, Michael Cohen yesterday reporting to prison for a 3-year term, and there's all these cameras in front of his house. And he says, the full truth has yet to come out and all of that. So you almost get the impression that there's a business model here for many news organizations who want to keep this story alive, going on and on and on and on and on, because it plays to a largely anti-Trump audience. But there is another side to this, and that is it seems to be in the president's political interest to keep this story alive, because he likes being able to rail against the witch hunt and the 18 angry Democrats and all of that. So the other day when the president said Bob Mueller should not testify, no redo for the Dems. Well, first of all, Congress is entitled to conduct oversight, and Mueller, who will still be a private citizen, will make up his own mind about whether he wants to testify. He's been this incredibly silent voice throughout this entire investigation, but that was a reversal by the president. Then you have the president tweeting all the crimes are on the other side, all caps. And that's what the Dems should be looking at, but they're not. And then he's really very good at sort of trolling his critics in the media and in the other party. So he says, I have very successful first 2 years of my presidency, the economy is roaring and all that. They know who they are. They have stolen 2 years of our presidency, collusion, delusion, and that we will never be able to get back. Now, I kind of read that as, you go to a horrible movie and say, I can never get that 2 hours of my life back. He's saying, look, I went through this ordeal for 2 years for nothing, because in his view, it was all a hoax and all that. Not buying that at all. And obviously, the Mueller investigation did end up with a lot of other people being indicted, but no finding of collusion and no position on obstruction. Well, people started going nuts. What, President Trump wants this? And the president fueled that when he retweeted Jerry Falwell Jr. as saying, I now support reparations, interesting term, Trump should have 2 years added to his first term as payback for the time stolen by this corrupt, failed coup. Here they are. He is echoing the president's language on coup. Well, there's no way on earth that Trump's going to get 2 more years in office. He might get 4 more years in office if he beats the Democrats next year, but not some extra 2 years. But again, it has the Democrats, the media, sort of up in arms because they react to every single thing he says, does, retweets, you name it. And with Nancy Pelosi telling the New York Times she's worried, no evidence, but she's just worried that the president might dispute a 2020 Democratic victory unless it's a very big margin, that adds fuel to the debate. So ultimately, our long national nightmare is not over, not by a long shot. You have both sides for their own reasons. The media, maybe for clicks and ratings and playing to a certain audience. The president, because it stirs up his base to want a counter investigation of how this whole probe got started. Carter Page and George Papadopoulos, as well as keeping Mueller quiet. If he's been exonerated, why does he care if Bob Mueller testifies? So both are still acting like, they barely even pause to take a breath. It's still going on. It's still dominating the news. And as far as I can see, that's going to be happening for some time to come.